I've never been the type to get easily spooked. I always considered myself a man of logic, a man who could stare down the most unsettling of situations without breaking a sweat. But that all changed during my time working the night shift at the old Elmwood Hospital. It was a late fall night, colder than usual for October. The kind of chill that gets into your bones no matter how many layers you wear. The hospital was a huge, sprawling complex on the outskirts of town, built in the early 1900s, and you could tell it had been here for decades. The dim lights, the long, winding hallways that always seemed to stretch just a bit too far, and the constant hum of machinery created an atmosphere that left you on edge. But the creepiest part was that it wasn't the patients or the dark corners of the building that terrified me. It was the silence. The night staff, including me, had become the last line of defense for a place that most people avoided after dark. At night, the place seemed to take on a life of its own. No one really wanted to be there, but someone had to keep things running. That's when I met Ryan, my new coworker. Ryan had worked here longer than I had and had a calm demeanor about him. Too calm, actually. He never spoke much, but I liked that. He was the kind of guy who preferred to keep to himself, and honestly, that suited me just fine. The first time I walked the long corridors with him, I noticed how the lights flickered, never enough to completely go out, just enough to make you question your sanity. "You'll get used to it," Ryan said one night when I asked him about it. His voice was low, almost like he was trying to hide something. "You'll hear things. Things you can't explain. Just don't go looking for them." At first, I thought he was just joking around, playing some kind of sick prank on the new guy. But as the nights wore on, I began hearing those things. Faint whispers, footsteps that echoed through the empty hallways when there was no one around, and shadows that moved just out of the corner of my eye. But it wasn't until the third week that it truly began. That night, it was just me and Ryan working the night shift together. We were supposed to monitor the patients in the psychiatric ward. The place had always had a reputation for being different. I was on my usual round, checking the rooms when I heard a door creak open behind me. My stomach dropped. I wasn't near any rooms that should be open, and none of the patients were supposed to be up at this hour. I turned quickly, ready to confront whoever was walking around, but there was no one there. Just the sound of the door swinging slowly in the silence. The air felt heavier. I don't know how else to describe it, thicker, like something was suffocating the room. I walked cautiously back to the station, my feet dragging a little more than usual. When I looked up, Ryan was standing at the desk, staring at the monitors without a word. But something about the way he was staring unnerved me. His eyes, they were wide, unblinking, fixated on the screen like a man who had seen something he shouldn't have. I don't know why I didn't say anything at the time. But deep down, I think I knew something was terribly wrong. And that was when I realized, maybe Ryan wasn't the one keeping me safe. Maybe, just maybe, he was part of whatever was haunting this place. The clock on the wall ticked louder, a deafening sound in the otherwise quiet room. And then, the first real scream came. It wasn't like any scream I had ever heard before. It was raw, primal, filled with so much terror that it made my skin crawl. It echoed through the halls, vibrating the very walls around me. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest, unsure of what to do. The scream seemed to come from nowhere, and yet, it felt so close, like it was right there, just beyond the door. Ryan didn't move. His gaze was still locked on the monitors, his face expressionless, almost too calm. A part of me wanted to call out to him, to ask if he had heard it too, but I couldn't make a sound. The air around me was thick, like a presence had settled in, something that didn't belong here, that shouldn't be here. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and my breath quickened. "Ryan," I finally whispered, my voice shaky. But he didn't respond. He just stood there, staring. The longer I looked at him, the more I felt like something was wrong. Not just with the situation, but with him. His eyes were wide, but there was a strange emptiness in them, a void that sent a chill down my spine. "Ryan?" I repeated, louder this time. Suddenly, he turned his head slowly toward me. His face was blank, expressionless, like he was in some kind of trance. "It's coming," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Before I could ask what he meant, the lights above us flickered violently. The whole building seemed to shake as if something had just slammed into it from the inside. The monitors on the desk went black for a split second, and then flashed back on with an image that made my stomach turn. It was a patient. One of the psychiatric ward residents, Nina. But it wasn't like any footage I had seen before. The video feed showed her standing in the corner of her room, but her body was contorted at an unnatural angle, her arms twisted behind her back as if she were being pulled by invisible hands. Her mouth was open in a silent scream, her eyes wide and hollow, staring directly at the camera. And then, she turned her head, slowly, agonizingly, toward the lens, locking eyes with me. My blood ran cold. Ryan didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. He just kept watching, that same eerie calm on his face, like he was waiting for something. "Do you see it?" he asked, his voice almost distant. "It knows we're here." I couldn't tear my eyes away from the screen. Nina's figure began to twitch, her body jerking violently, like she was being pulled in different directions. And then, as if someone had flipped a switch, the monitor went black again. There was another scream, closer this time, coming from down the hall. A scream that sounded like it was coming from the very walls of the building. Without thinking, I grabbed my flashlight and headed toward the source of the noise. Ryan didn't follow. He just stood there, his eyes fixed on the empty hall. I could hear him whispering something under his breath, but I couldn't make it out. I reached the door of the psychiatric ward, my pulse pounding in my ears. The hall was dark, only lit by the faint glow of emergency exit signs. I hesitated for a moment, then pushed the door open. The room inside was empty, except for the strange, cold draft that hit me as soon as I stepped in. The air felt wrong. It was almost suffocating, like the space was too tight, too full of something unseen. My flashlight swept across the room, revealing nothing out of the ordinary. But then I saw it. In the far corner, behind a curtain, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. There was a shape, a figure, hunched over, its back to me. For a split second, I thought it was just a patient, sitting motionless. But then the figure slowly turned its head. And it was Nina. Her face was pale, eyes wide open, her pupils completely black. Her mouth was twisted into a grotesque grin, too wide, too unnaturally stretched. And she started to move, crawling toward me, dragging her broken body with a sickening sound. Her arms and legs twisted in ways that shouldn't be possible, each movement jerky and spasmodic. Her eyes never left mine, even as her body contorted and bent. I couldn't breathe. My heart pounded in my chest as I stumbled backward, my flashlight shaking in my hand. But Nina didn't stop. She kept crawling toward me, her grin growing wider, her body stretching out like a nightmare come to life. And then, just as I thought I was going to lose my mind, there was a voice. Not Nina's, but Ryan's. "Don't look away," he whispered from the doorway. "Whatever you do, don't look away." I could barely comprehend what he was saying, my mind reeling from the sight of Nina's twisted form. But I couldn't tear my eyes from her. It was like some force was compelling me to watch, to stay still, to keep looking. And that's when I saw it, the shadow behind her. It was long and dark, stretching unnaturally across the floor. It was the shape of something that wasn't quite human, something that shouldn't exist. Then, in an instant, the shadow lunged. I barely had time to scream. The shadow moved faster than I could react, rushing toward me with a terrifying speed. I felt it before I saw it, a rush of cold air, colder than any breeze I'd ever felt. A sensation of something dark, something crushing, pressing down on my chest, suffocating me. In the split second it took for my brain to process what was happening, the shadow reached me. It wrapped around my legs like ice, dragging me back toward the dark corner of the room. My body felt paralyzed, my limbs frozen in place, as if I were trapped in a nightmare where I couldn't move or scream. The coldness spread up my body, creeping into my chest, my throat. I looked up, and there it was, the thing that had been stalking the hospital, that dark figure now fully materialized before me. It wasn't human. At least, not in the way I understood. It was a shape, a twisted, writhing mass of shadow and form, long and stretched, with eyes that glowed faintly, a sickly greenish yellow. Its limbs were contorted at impossible angles, like they didn't belong, and it had no mouth, but I could feel its presence in my head, its whispers, its laughter. But it wasn't laughing at me. It was laughing at Ryan. Ryan stood in the doorway, his eyes wide and hollow, staring at me with an expression that was vacant, empty, almost like he wasn't there. I could feel him watching me, but it was as if he wasn't truly seeing me. His gaze was locked, unblinking, as if something had taken control of him, something dark. "Ryan!" I shouted, my voice hoarse, my throat tight. "Get out of here! Help me!" But he didn't move. His face remained emotionless as he watched, his breath shallow, as if he were waiting for something. The thing, the shadow, seemed to take pleasure in my struggle, its dark form growing larger, its grip tightening on me. I was starting to lose hope. My vision was narrowing, my mind becoming foggy from the cold and the terror. But then, something snapped. A sudden surge of adrenaline shot through me, a desperate need to survive. I forced my arm to move, my fingers gripping the flashlight. With all the strength I had left, I swung it towards the shadow. The moment the light made contact, the shadow recoiled, but not before it hissed, a sound like 1,000 nails scratching across metal. It released me, but only for a moment. The darkness behind it seemed to ripple and pulse like a living thing, and then, as if in slow motion, the figure leaned forward and grabbed me by the wrist. That's when I realized. This thing, this entity, it wasn't just after me. It was after Ryan. "Ryan!" I shouted again, more desperately this time. "You have to fight it. You're not alone. Look at me." For the briefest moment, Ryan blinked. His eyes flickered, and there was something there, something human. I thought for a second that he might wake up, snap out of whatever trance he was in. But then, without warning, he turned his head, and I saw it, the same dark, twisted smile that had been on Nina's face. It was like Ryan's body was no longer his. Like something was controlling him. He stepped forward, moving toward me, but there was no warmth in his eyes, no recognition. It was as if I were staring at a stranger, a shell, nothing more. The thing pulled harder on my wrist, dragging me closer to the corner. My body hit the cold wall, and I could feel its grip tightening again, its presence growing heavier, like a weight pressing down on me. The laughter in my mind grew louder. "Ryan, please!" I gasped, my chest tightening. "Fight it. You can fight it." Ryan's lips parted, and for a split second, I thought I saw a flicker of recognition, like he was coming back to himself. But then, just as quickly, that flicker vanished, replaced by a deep, guttural voice that wasn't his. "He belongs to us now," the voice whispered from Ryan's throat, but it wasn't his voice. It was deeper, raspier, cold like ice. I didn't know what to do. I was out of options. My vision was blurring, the room spinning. But then, just as everything seemed to close in on me, I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed the nearest object I could reach, a chair leg that had been knocked over earlier in the chaos. With a single, desperate swing, I struck Ryan across the face, hard. The force of the blow made him stumble back, and for a moment, he seemed to snap out of whatever hold had gripped him. His eyes, those eyes, came back to life. My Ryan was back, but for how long? For a split second, I saw something in his eyes. A flicker of humanity. Then the shadow let out a deafening scream, one that pierced my ears, sending shockwaves through my skull. And in that moment, I knew we were running out of time. Ryan staggered back, shaking his head, as if trying to shake off the fog that clouded his mind. He looked at me, really looked at me, and finally spoke in a hoarse whisper. "We have to get out of here, now." The building was collapsing around us. And in the distance, I could hear the sound of footsteps, more of them. More figures, more shadows. And that's when I realized, I wasn't just fighting for my life anymore. I was fighting for my soul. I barely had time to process Ryan's words before everything around me seemed to fall apart. The building groaned as if the very foundation was being torn apart from the inside. The floor beneath my feet shook violently, and the lights flickered, dimming to an eerie red as emergency alarms blared overhead. The sound of those alarms blended with the chaos, screams, whispers, and the pounding of something coming closer. I didn't wait. I grabbed Ryan by the arm, yanking him towards the door, my heart pounding in my chest. We needed to get out. We needed to leave, now. The thing, the shadow, was still lurking somewhere, and I could feel it. I could feel it hunting us. Ryan didn't fight me. His eyes were wide, frantic, as if he could sense the same thing I could, something terrible was coming. He stumbled beside me as we rushed down the dark hallway, the walls vibrating with each step. Behind us, I could hear it, the slow shuffle of feet, like something was following. And it was getting closer. The door to the stairwell was only a few feet away. We were almost there. "Ryan!" I hissed, glancing over my shoulder, hoping we were almost free. "Stay with me." Ryan's face had lost all color. His hands were shaking. "It's not that simple," he gasped, his voice full of terror. "It never lets you go. Once it knows you're here, it doesn't stop. It doesn't let you leave." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to believe him, but I couldn't. We had to get out of here. There had to be a way out. But as I reached for the door, I felt it, the pressure, that dark weight on my chest, pressing me down, making it harder to breathe. And then, from the corner of my eye, I saw it again, the shadow. Its form was stretched unnaturally tall, blocking the hallway, its limbs crawling along the walls, twisting in impossible angles. It was like it was everywhere at once, too many places to escape from. "Run!" I screamed, grabbing Ryan's arm and yanking him through the door. We tumbled down the stairs, our feet pounding on the steps as we descended faster than I thought possible. I could hear the thing behind us, its heavy presence following us, inching closer with each step. The building was alive, breathing with us, shaking with every footfall as if it wanted to swallow us whole. We reached the bottom floor, but the exit wasn't in sight. The stairwell led into a long, narrow corridor, the same one I had walked down countless times before. Only now, it felt different. It felt wrong. The air was thick, too thick to breathe. The walls were damp and covered in strange, black streaks, almost like something had melted down them. "No," Ryan gasped, pulling back. This isn't right." I didn't have time to question him. We had to move. But as we rounded the corner, I saw it, another door. The exit. It was just up ahead, shining with the faintest light. But then, the shadow appeared again, this time, right in front of the door. It was like a living, breathing nightmare, tall, dark, its form shifting constantly, a mass of darkness that seemed to defy all logic. Its eyes gleamed, glowing brighter, and I could hear its voice again, echoing inside my head. "You can't escape. You belong to us now." I turned, looking at Ryan, and for the first time, I saw something in his eyes, a glimmer of the man I had worked with, the man I had known. But it was fleeting, gone in an instant. "Ryan, listen to me," I said, my voice trembling. "We're not going to die here. We can make it out. We have to fight it. He nodded slowly, but I could see the fear in his eyes, the doubt creeping in. He wasn't sure we could survive this. And in that moment, I wasn't sure either. But then, without thinking, I grabbed the nearest object, one of the old medical carts that had been left abandoned in the hallway, and hurled it at the shadow. The metal clattered loudly as it collided with the dark mass. The creature screeched, a high-pitched, inhuman sound that made my skin crawl, and for a brief moment, the shadow recoiled. "Go!" I shouted. "Now!" Ryan and I didn't hesitate. We bolted for the exit. We didn't look back. The door was just a few feet away. My pulse was in my throat, and my legs burned from the effort, but we couldn't stop. We couldn't slow down. And just as we reached the door, I heard the sound I dreaded most, the sound of footsteps behind us. It was too late to turn around now. We burst through the exit, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I took a deep breath of fresh air. But even as we ran into the parking lot, away from the building, I felt the pressure in my chest again. The shadow wasn't gone. It was still there, following us, lingering just beyond the corner of my mind. I didn't know if I had escaped. I didn't know if Ryan had. But I did know one thing, whatever it was that haunted Elmwood Hospital, it wasn't finished with us yet. And it never would be. We didn't speak a word as we ran through the hospital parking lot, our breath coming in ragged gasps. The air outside was cold, the night wrapped in an eerie quiet that seemed to mock the chaos we had just escaped. For a moment, it felt almost like a dream, like maybe I was still trapped inside that horrible building, struggling to wake up. But the cold bite of the night air told me it wasn't a dream. We were outside. We were free, for now. I glanced at Ryan, and he was gasping for breath too, his face pale and drenched in sweat, his hands trembling. He was alive. We were both alive. But the feeling of being hunted, of something dark and malevolent still lingering in the back of my mind, didn't fade. It only grew stronger the longer we stood there. Ryan finally spoke, his voice weak, almost a whisper. "It's not over." I knew what he meant. The shadow, the entity that had taken hold of the hospital, had followed us. I could feel it, its presence was still there, lurking in the shadows of my mind, crawling just beneath the surface of my thoughts. It had let us escape, but I knew it wouldn't stop until it had us, body, soul, everything. "Where do we go?" I asked, my voice strained. I felt lost. I didn't know who to trust anymore. The hospital, the people who had worked there, Ryan, none of it felt real anymore. Ryan didn't answer at first. He just looked at the hospital, staring at it like it was something far worse than any building I had ever seen. And then, finally, he spoke. "It's never really over. You don't just escape it. It follows you. Wherever you go. Whatever you do." He shuddered. "I've seen it before. People leave the hospital. They leave the town. They move across the country. And the next thing you know, they're calling me, telling me strange things are happening again." His words hit me like a punch to the stomach. I felt my heart drop. "It follows you." That meant there was no escape. No safe place to run. But what scared me even more was what Ryan said next. "I didn't think it would be you. Not after all this time. But, you shouldn't have seen it. You shouldn't have survived." "Survived?" I echoed, my voice cracking. "You think I survived?" Ryan didn't answer. His gaze shifted, like he was seeing something I couldn't. I followed his line of sight, but all I saw was the empty hospital parking lot, the streetlights casting long shadows over the pavement. "I told you," Ryan continued, his voice quiet. "There's only one way to get rid of it. Only one way to make it stop." I didn't know what he meant, but I didn't want to know. Not after everything we had been through. The shadows, the whispers, the way the walls seemed to close in on us in that place. I couldn't go back. I wouldn't. But Ryan wasn't finished. He took a deep breath, steadying himself before looking me dead in the eyes. You have to destroy it. Destroy the source. If you don't, it will keep coming back. It will follow you for the rest of your life. It never stops. I took a step back, my mind spinning. Destroy the source. What source? What the hell was he talking about? He must have seen the confusion on my face because he shook his head slowly. It's not a ghost, not like you think. It's not just some cursed thing. It's something older. Something ancient. It was there before the hospital. It was there before anyone even thought to build a building on this land. My blood ran cold at his words. The idea of something older than the hospital, something that had existed before people even walked on this land, it was more than I could handle. But Ryan wasn't finished. It feeds on fear. It feeds on you. And the only way to stop it is to find its origin. Find the place where it started. And burn it to the ground. I could barely breathe. Everything in me screamed that it was impossible, that this was all too much. But something deep down, something primal, told me that Ryan wasn't lying. That thing, it wasn't done with us. I looked back at the hospital. The building was still there, looming in the distance, silent in the night. But now, it seemed darker, almost like it was waiting. Waiting for us to come back. Waiting to finish what it had started. And the worst part? I could feel it. I could feel its presence even out here, in the parking lot, like it was wrapped around my throat, suffocating me. Ryan turned toward me, his eyes hollow and empty again. You don't have to do this. But if you don't, you'll never be free. I stood there for a long time, staring at the hospital. My mind was racing, thoughts spinning out of control. I had just barely made it out. We had both barely made it out alive. And now Ryan was telling me that there was no true escape. That there was only one way to stop it, and it was a path I didn't want to walk. But the way Ryan was looking at me, like he knew what I was thinking, I knew that there was no choice. I had to face it. I had to go back. To the source. And somehow, I had to destroy whatever the hell was haunting Elmwood Hospital. Because if I didn't, I knew I wouldn't be able to live with myself. The decision hit me like a wave, crashing over me with a cold finality. I knew, deep down, there was no choice. If I ran now, if I turned my back and tried to leave this nightmare behind, it would never stop. It would never let me leave. I would carry the weight of it forever, feeling its shadow at my back every waking moment. Ryan stood by me, silent. He knew exactly what I was thinking, and he didn't try to argue. His eyes were hollow, resigned. He had been here before, walked this path, and he was waiting for me to make the only choice that mattered. We need to go back inside, he said quietly, his voice low. We need to find the source. Before it finds us. The words were like a knife to my chest. We weren't just walking back into a building. We were walking into the heart of the darkness that had already claimed us. And I could feel it, like a thick fog surrounding us, pulling at the edges of my mind, testing my resolve. We turned back toward the entrance, the hospital looming in the distance like a dark sentinel. It felt like it was watching us, waiting. And I swear, I saw a flicker of movement in the shadows by the door. But when I blinked, it was gone. Ryan took the lead as we approached the building. His footsteps were heavy, dragging, like the weight of everything we'd just experienced had settled on his shoulders. It wasn't just the fear that slowed him down. It was something deeper, something far older than any of us. We reached the door, and I hesitated. The last time I had walked through it, it had been a portal to hell. I could still hear the echoes of Nina's tortured screams in my head, the cold, hollow laughter of the shadow. But now, we had no choice. We had to go in. Ryan pushed the door open. It creaked loudly, a sound that reverberated through the empty halls. The air inside was thick, heavier than it had been before. The smell of stale air, of rot and decay, hit me immediately. I fought the urge to gag, forcing myself to focus on the task at hand. I stepped inside, and it was like walking into a different world. The hospital had changed. It felt wrong, more oppressive than it had before. The walls seemed to close in around us, the darkness thicker, more suffocating. The hallway stretched out in front of us, endless, a labyrinth of cold metal and peeling paint. The flickering lights cast long, twisted shadows that seemed to move on their own, like they were alive. I could feel the eyes of the building on us, watching, waiting for us to make the wrong move. Ryan walked ahead, not saying anything, his eyes scanning the dark hallways like he was looking for something. His movements were slow, deliberate, as if he had done this before. I followed closely, my heart hammering in my chest. "Where do we start?" I whispered, my voice trembling. Ryan didn't answer immediately. He stopped in front of a door that I recognized, room 217, the one where we had found Nina. He hesitated for a moment, then pushed the door open. The room inside was dark, cold. But it was different from the last time I had seen it. There were no patients here now, no nurses or doctors. Just an empty, silent space. But the atmosphere was thick, oppressive, like something was hanging in the air. Ryan stepped inside, motioning for me to follow. It started here. This is where it began. I followed him into the room, my eyes scanning the walls. There was something familiar about it, but also, something off. The walls were covered in those strange black streaks I had seen earlier, like something had dripped down them, something unnatural. Ryan walked toward the far corner of the room and knelt down. He placed his hand on the floor, where the black streaks seemed to form a pattern. A symbol, etched into the floor. "This is it," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The source." I felt a chill run down my spine. The air seemed to grow colder as I stepped closer to him. I could feel the weight of whatever this thing was, pressing down on me, suffocating me. "It's been here for so long," Ryan continued, his hand tracing the edges of the symbol. "This place, this land, it was built on something dark, something that was always here. It's not just a curse. It's a pact. A binding, a thing that was promised. Long before anyone even thought of this hospital." The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end as I processed his words. This wasn't just a haunting. This was something older, something more powerful than anything I had ever imagined. And it had been feeding on the fear of everyone who had walked through these halls, for decades. Suddenly, the temperature in the room dropped even further. I could see my breath fog in front of me. The lights flickered, and I heard the sound of something moving behind us. Footsteps. Heavy, dragging footsteps. I turned around, and there, in the doorway, stood the shadow. It was massive now, its form filling the doorway, its dark limbs stretched impossibly long. Its eyes gleamed with that sickly yellow light, and I could hear its whispers, its voice seeping into my mind. "You should never have come back." I felt a surge of panic, but Ryan didn't move. He didn't flinch. He just stared at the shadow, as if he had been expecting this. "We have to finish this," he said quietly, his voice steady. "There's no turning back now." I could feel the pressure building around me, like the walls themselves were closing in. But Ryan stepped forward, moving toward the symbol on the floor, his eyes fixed on the darkness that was now creeping closer. And then he did something that made my blood run cold. He whispered something under his breath, something in a language I didn't understand. The moment he spoke, the shadow recoiled, a screeching sound filling the room. But it didn't disappear. It only grew angrier, its form twisting and distorting. "It's not enough," Ryan muttered, his voice shaking. We need to burn it. I didn't understand. Burn it? How? But I didn't have time to ask. The shadow lunged at us, its arms reaching out, its mouth opening wide, its terrible, dark voice screeching in rage. And that was when I realized the truth. This was it. This was the only way out. It was time to end it, or die trying. The shadow lunged, its grotesque form filling the doorway. The air crackled with a presence that sent a cold shiver straight through my bones. I could hear its whispering grow louder, the voice in my mind urging me to run, to escape, but there was nowhere to run anymore. No place left to hide. Ryan was ahead of me, moving toward the center of the room where the symbol on the floor pulsed with an unnatural energy. His eyes were locked on it, his hand trembling as he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, tattered book. "It's time," he said, his voice steady despite the madness unfolding around us. "We have to close it. We have to sever the bond." I didn't understand, but I didn't need to. The shadow was closing in, and every instinct told me to trust Ryan. There was no other option. He was the only one who had lived with this nightmare for so long, and if there was any chance of survival, it was through him. The shadow twisted again, its form contorting as it screeched in fury. The lights flickered above us, and the room seemed to bend, as if the very building was distorting, warping under the weight of the creature's power. Ryan opened the book and started chanting in a low, guttural tone. I couldn't understand the words, but they felt ancient. Old, older than time itself. They cut through the chaos like a blade, and as he spoke, I could feel the energy in the room shift. The very air felt charged, thick with something that wasn't quite alive. And then, the ground shook. The shadow hissed, its form beginning to flicker and distort as if the very fabric of reality around it was being unraveled. Its eyes burned brighter, its mouth opened wider, and for a moment, I thought I could hear the screams of every soul it had ever claimed. I was frozen, rooted to the spot, but Ryan didn't stop. He kept chanting, his voice growing louder and more urgent. Suddenly, a blinding light flashed from the symbol on the floor. It was as if the very ground was burning, the light filling the room, filling my entire being. I could hear the shadow screeching, the sound almost unbearable, like 1,000 voices crying out in pain. And then, just as quickly as it had appeared, the shadow lunged toward us one last time. But this time, there was no escape. The light exploded in a blinding wave, and the darkness was consumed by it. The air snapped, and for a moment, everything went silent. A heavy stillness settled over the room, thick and suffocating. I opened my eyes, and the hospital felt different. The darkness was gone. The oppressive weight that had been choking me, suffocating me, was gone. Ryan stood in the center of the room, still holding the book, his face pale but resolute. The symbol on the floor had disappeared, leaving nothing but cold, cracked tile beneath our feet. The shadows had lifted, and the hospital was silent. We were no longer trapped. Ryan collapsed to his knees, exhaustion evident on his face. I rushed to his side, gripping his arm to steady him. "We did it," I whispered, disbelief filling my voice. "It's over." Ryan shook his head, a tired smile crossing his face. "For now. It's over for now," he said. "But this place, it will always be here. It leaves a mark. It always comes back in some way." I didn't know what to say. We had survived, but at what cost? The terror, the darkness, the haunting presence, it had all been so real. So tangible. And now, with the thing finally gone, I could feel the exhaustion weighing on my soul. I glanced at the door. Outside, the world still existed, the night still stretched out before us, but something inside me had shifted. I didn't know how to move forward from here. How to go back to a life that had no place for what I had just experienced. "Let's go," I said finally, my voice steady, though my hands still trembled. "It's over." We both stood slowly, and together we walked toward the exit, leaving behind the horror that had claimed Elmwood Hospital for so long. But as we reached the door, I couldn't help but glance back, one last time. The building stood there,